everybody, it's me, your Intrepid Songwriter, chronicling my adventures as a songwriter because seriously, who does that? I have with me today Mr. John Ludwig, the director of Chicago Songwriters Collective. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. Great to see you.
Yes.
I want to give you a moment to talk about the collective. Tell us why you started it. Tell us, how it operates, what people can expect for a meeting, whatever you'd like to share.
Sure. The collective actually precedes me by a number of years. It goes back into the late 80s when a guy named Mark Zeus, who's a songwriter, founded it. And it was kind of a smaller group for many years. And we were always trying to struggle getting members. It's one of those things, how do people find us?
Mm-hmm.
And then we came across Meetup. Actually, I did.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, I had been elected president in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
which may be one of those life sentences, as they call it, being a president. But I got elected, and I was looking around, found Meetup. And it seemed like a very good setup for getting our word out as to who we were. Our website for that, it's www.meetup.com/vocalist-151.
Okay.
Which is kind of not, you'd think Chicago Songwriters Collective would be in there, but anyway, when I signed up, they assigned us a name. But
Okay.
the Chicago Songwriters Collective, like I say, goes back as an organization a number of years, though.
All right. And so, what could people expect from a typical meeting, and when do you typically meet?
We have, at this point, there's actually 3 different groups meeting. One of the challenges for an organization that kind of spans all of Chicago is people say, well, if I live in Bartlett, I don't want to meet in downtown Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, I understand that. That makes sense, actually. And so we have a meetup that's kind of on the south side on Costner, 2000 block. We have one up at the Niles Public Library. And then we have a group that formed recently that's Christian songwriters, and their site has been kind of moving around, so to give different people options, where the first meeting maybe was way north and the next one's a little west, and so on and so forth. So that group's moving around a little.
How often do you meet?
Typically monthly is the schedule. And what happens is we will get together, and I like to have kind of a songwriting topic. Maybe we'll talk about something educational.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you end up just sharing with people because you have, much like you're familiar with, you have people at different levels of experience.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to have common questions or needs that come up, and in the act of just talking with each other, there's a lot of good information that goes back, be it from where's a good place to get out and play if there's an open mic type thing, to, well, where should I record, or I've got this recording, how does it sound? And we go into some of those type things, and then everyone typically gets a chance to share a song of theirs.
Oh, fantastic. So you get a chance to perform or
Right.
or play a track or...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, well, the world's gotten more electronic, so, sometimes people are bringing in something that recorded a track.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, like I'm a guy with a guitar,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of the basis I'm coming. Sometimes I bring recorded things in too.
Okay. Now, do you typically meet the same day, each month, same day of the week?
Yeah, well, like the one in Niles we call the third Thursday meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's the third Thursday. And the one that's coming up this Monday is the fourth Monday. So we try to keep that as steady as we can. And, sometimes holidays and all that comes into play. But if you were to go to the website,
Mm-hmm.
it's got the calendar on there. It goes out a number of months, and you can keep up with what's going on.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that there's a group dedicated primarily to Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
With the other 2 groups, is it genre specific there as well, or is it anything you like?
It's anything and everything. I mean, that's one of the things about me is, from my perspective, music's music. You could actually reduce it down to a series of notes, and regardless of genre, those notes represent the same things. So we have people of all different styles come in.
Fantastic.
Which I think makes it interesting, because one of the trends, I'd say, in the world nowadays is collaboration. You know, there was a time when everyone kind of had their thing. You know, I do Bulgarian folk music. Well, that's my thing. Well, now that guy might be working with Brazilian drummers or, you know, whatever. I mean, it's just a very wide open, which I think is healthy for music.
Fantastic. Now, how long does a meeting typically last, just in terms of?
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
I mean, now there's some variation, like if it's a good night and, you know, people get together and start jamming, you know, hey, we might go longer. I've gotten home around midnight some nights, you know, but I pay for that the next day. But anyway, you know how that can be, right?
I was going to say occupational hazard.
Yeah.
So, but nothing like an impromptu jam session to make your night.
That makes you feel good, no doubt.
Okay, so now tell me this. In your experience, what do you think is some of the biggest mistakes that songwriters make? What kind of stuff do we need to avoid?
I think one of the things in a broad sense that people do is they hang on to their music too tightly.
What do you mean specifically?
Well, with that is like, let's say I wrote this song, okay, and it's like my child, right? It's that special to me. I created this, it must be the best song ever written, right? So one of the things sometimes when you have that attitude is you don't want anyone to tell you that it's not that. But like one of the things we try to do at the collective meetings is provide what we call constructive feedback. In other words, we're not trying to be mean to say, hey, that's no good, but it's like, did you think about maybe adding a bridge? Or, you know, you've got 8 verses and no chorus. You know, and so, you know, sometimes you give people ideas, and some people are open to them and others aren't. And then I think because that act of the creation of the thing is so special to a songwriter that you want to share it, and sometimes you tend to do that before you really should. So like one of the things I do is I've been with different sites over the years where you can submit your music for consideration to anything from TV shows to, you know, various artists picking it up, and so one of the ones I do that with is called Broad Jam.
Yes, I'm familiar.
You're familiar with it.
Uh-huh.
And so when you submit something, your songs can get rated by other people, but for you to see that rating, you have to listen to other people's songs and give them some feedback, right? And sometimes you listen to stuff and it's someone who's, you know, doing this and singing along, and you're like, boy, you shouldn't submit that. You know, it's not at a point where anyone can hear beyond the things that aren't right with it, you know. Some people can pull that off, but so some of that, it just, you know, get some more feedback from people, I think. You know, keep working to improve yourself, and don't be so, you know, dead set that you've written the perfect song and everyone needs to see that, and if they don't, they must be wrong. So
I'm laughing because I'm guilty.
Yeah, well,
but
every songwriter, what's your favorite song? The one you just wrote, right? You know, I mean,
well, that was one of the first things I had to learn, and I read it in a book. I forgot the name of the book, but it was that songwriting is rewriting. That you've got to get that in your head. Everything you just said, that no matter how beautiful you think the baby is, baby needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, right. And my other practical thing to people is, you know, go out and play in some format. And, you know, get that under your belt. Because a lot of times people might have a good song and, you know, you're out at some open mic and here's the mic and someone's singing and playing down here and you're like, I can't hear you. You know, sing in the mic. You know, so just some of that.
Well, that's a whole different aspect, performance.
Right.
It's different being a singer-songwriter if you're going to perform your own material, because that's actually a separate set of skills. Creating a song, you know, is one thing, and sometimes, you know, sometimes people don't realize how much of a different skill set it is, taking a song and bringing it to life versus actually creating the song itself. You know, and some people only create the song and they really don't want to perform their work. They really want others to do it. And some people, like you said, don't want anybody just let me do it.
Well, a famous example would be Irving Berlin, who was, you know, arguably one of the most successful songwriters in history. But I guess the guy couldn't carry a tune in a bucket himself, and he really was a terrible piano player to the point where he had to hire someone to come in. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, the story I heard is he only played the black keys.
Right.
Right. But you know, here's a guy who wrote a song like White Christmas.
Right.
You know, God Bless America, things like that that
Still
are
going
standards
strong.
of standards.
Right.
But you know, he was definitely not a performer.
Absolutely. So that can be both encouraging and discouraging depending on which side of that coin you
Right.
fall on, right? Cool. Okay. Besides yourself, who is your favorite writer?
Well, and that to me is a hard question to answer, part of which is the nature of me, which I'm someone, if I go to a all-you-can-eat buffet, I have a lot of trouble because I like most things that are there. So,
Okay.
and that's kind of, I guess, symptomatic of my life, is there are a lot of people I like.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if I'm going to get pinned down, which is generally hard to do, and you can ask my wife about that, but that's a whole different topic. But if I was to get pinned down, I'll probably list someone who you've never heard of, and his name's David M. Bailey.
Okay.
And David is someone I felt kind of a deep kinship with, and I accidentally heard him on a radio program in the late 90s, maybe 2000. And he was someone who had this kind of amazing story in that he was a guy who grew up playing some music. His father was a Presbyterian theologian. He grew up in Lebanon and played some music, right? Well, then he got serious, went through college, graduated, started working in corporate America. One day he wakes up, he's had some tremendous pain. He's in a hospital, and they say, Mr. Bailey, you've got a grade 4 brain tumor, and you should get ready for the end.
Wow.
And he said, well, what are the odds? They said, well, maybe 1 out of 100. And he said, well, I guess someone's got to be the one.
Mm.
So over the next 12 and a half years, he put out 23 CDs.
Wow.
And he was, I guess if I was to describe him, I'd say he was a warrior of hope. I mean, his music was he was supposed to die in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, after 12 and a half years, it did come back, catch up with him.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the sort of things he said were just, it was a positive message. And one of my, I guess, honors in life was I got to open for him one time.
Wow.
And that was before it had come back. He went over 10 years clean,
Mm-hmm.
and go back, get the brain scan. And his story was so dramatic. He was actually on 60 Minutes, things like that.
Okay.
And so when he got sick, I said, I know you're not able to get out, but let me see if I can learn one of your songs. So I learned one called One More Day,
Mm-hmm.
his, that talks about all of us have today. Whatever's going on, you got today, you ought to make the most of that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, even though you're not out there playing, I'm going to play that when I go out, people will hear your message. And ever since I've been doing that. And like I say, that's a guy who I think made a difference.
Wow. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Great. Wow. And it's great that you got a chance to open for him too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a special thing.
Cool. Now, how do you think songwriting has changed, like in the last 5 to 10 years, like since the turn of the century?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? How do you think things are different for us now as writers than they were in the 20th century?
Well, obviously the connected world we're in
Mm-hmm.
changes things, and I think to some extent that affects people like coming to actual meetings like the Chicago Songwriters Collective.
Mm-hmm.
People figure, well, I can do everything in the world online. I don't need to leave. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right approach, because
Mm-hmm.
there's something about being face-to-face and just direct interaction with people. But, certainly now as a songwriter, I know people who write a lyric, put it up on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
here's it, what do you think of this? And people respond, then they write that, and, you can write that way. You can try to live in the Facebook world for stuff, but maybe I'm old-fashioned that way, but, I think somewhere along the line you need to actually see people and,
Mm-hmm.
Be in front of an audience and see, okay, does anybody get what I'm saying?
So we're dealing with a lot of digital or internet connectivity,
Right.
which is cool. But you're saying it's the organic feeling of being there, the human energy, the energy field that we create, and the dynamic of being able to perform your music off of a live audience.
Yeah.
That is some of your most valuable feedback.
Right. Well, and probably there's no high, I guess, in some sense, like being in front of an audience who's really with you.
That's true.
I mean, probably my favorite story on that, I mean, I had a couple, but probably the most interesting one is I got to play in maximum security at Cook County Jail once.
Really?
I did.
Wow.
And
that had to be interesting.
It was. I mean, first to get in, you literally had to make a list of, I'm bringing in 6 extra guitar strings. I mean, it was every single thing. And you walk in, you take off your It's like you're an anonymous person, and then the doors close behind you.
Right.
And I got in through a group that I'm involved with called Chicagoland Prison Outreach. Mm-hmm. And so I was playing to a group of maybe 200 guys. I was with 2 other songwriters from the collective, someone who was a co-president with me for a period of time, and then the person who was president before me. And we went in, and I've never had an audience just like connect like those guys did. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was one of those things like we were just so together. I mean, it was a great experience.
Funnily enough, I had a similar experience when I was in college. We went and sang. We did prison ministry with the gospel choir I was with. It was exactly what you said.
Right.
They were totally with us from start to finish, and it was just incredible. And they seemed to be really moved by what we were saying. And you're right. It was a life-changing experience for me as well. Now, tell me, what other songwriting organizations are you a part of besides the Chicago Collective?
Okay, well, I'm a member of ASCAP as a performing rights organization. Mm-hmm. And then I'm a member of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, NARIS, a.k.a. the Grammys. Mm-hmm. And that's a good organization. I certainly would encourage other songwriters to be part of that. Mm-hmm. And some of that, I mean, I've gone out 3 times to LA to see the Grammys live, which that's just a great experience to do. But the local chapter here in Chicago certainly is worth being part of. Mm-hmm. And in fact, just Thursday night, I was at one of their functions that was, once again, a very amazing story of a songwriter. If you've heard of a movie that's out now called Searching for Sugar Man.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, it's about this guy Rodriguez who, unbeknownst to him, for 30 years was like one of the top-selling artists in South Africa during the apartheid era. Mm-hmm. But he released these 2 albums in 70, 71. They were complete flops. He disappears from music, working manual labor for 30 years. Some guys from South Africa track him down, and he was as big as the Beatles sales-wise there. I mean, he was huge, and he was actually very much a part, his music was much a part of ending apartheid. And it's an amazing story. This guy never knew any of this. And over there, they didn't know that the rest of the world didn't think this guy was a superstar either. Well, he finally gets tracked down, and, he goes back to South Africa, does these concerts, sold out venues, 25,000. Neat story. And then the Grammy people actually had him there, and we got to do a Q&A with him afterwards. And very down-to-earth guy, just one of those stories, if you were to write this, you'd say, this is too ridiculous,
Right.
This can't be a real story, but there the guy is in front of me, But that's the sort of things you can get by those connections we were talking about,
Right.
Get out there, because I think a big part of music is being connected, knowing people. Probably, like on my bagpipe album, I worked with a guy who's a cellist. I got this crazy idea also, aside from hip-hop bagpipe, to do a cello bagpipe collaboration. So I worked with a guy I met one night. I met him at a Just Plain Folks, which was another music organization. Mm-hmm. They did a showcase, and he came from New York here to play one song 2 nights with Just Plain Folks. And this guy, he was someone who does classical compositions that are played around the world. We also play solid body cello, doing like Jimi Hendrix on it. So anyway, we kept up over the years, but there's a connection I made, and he became part of something I did.
Wow. That's
So
great.
you just don't know where the people you meet take you.
That is actually one of the best stories and testimonies of that whole principle about
Mhm.
how, as you said, you don't know where your relationships will go, but you also don't know the impact of your music, which is why it's so important to get it out. And that's one
Right.
thing I've struggled with, and one thing I'm always trying to overcome. And when I encounter other writers, it's the same kind of thing, because
Mhm.
sometimes you look at it and you're so busy judging it
Right.
until you don't give birth to it like you should, and you never know who it's going to touch or who it's going to connect with or who it's going to bless. So
Right.
yeah, no, that's fantastic. Now, where do you see, or where would you like the Chicago Songwriters Collective to be like in 5 years? 5 years from now, how do you see the group? What do you want it to be doing?
Well, this process of, I've called it decentralizing, can probably still continue.
Mm-hmm.
Because I say realistically, everyone in life now is very busy.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a given. At least I know that's true for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask people to go too far out of their way, it's just hard to get a crowd together for that. So 5 years from now, I'd like to think we continue to have multiple meetings and that there's more people attending,
Mm-hmm.
and that that community is there. That you've built a community of people who are interacting and
Mm-hmm.
helping each other along that journey.
Blase blue da bleep blop blue.